Hi, in today's video, I'd like to share with you my viewpoint on this representation of the Devdasi culture in the movie Shyam Singha Roy. This was a Telugu movie which was released in 2021. I happened to watch it around then, and I had liked the trailer because of certain elements which were shown in the trailer, and I understood it as that, and it turned out to be a little different, but I enjoyed the movie nonetheless because it had Calcutta as a backdrop, and it had dance as a backdrop to things which are very close to my heart, and it looked like it had some social reform and some feminism movement into it, which I'll then later on learn it was not so much the main focus, but yes, an important part of the story. Anyway, I'll get into that part of the video soon, but before that I'd love for you to let me know if you've seen the movie and what you thought of it, or if you've not heard of the movie, and then I would suggest you can check it out on Netflix. Okay, so now a little bit of background. I am a dancer myself, an Indian classical dancer of the form Odissi, and I have been making presentations about this dance form as well as the dance in several places. Like so far I have done that in USA, in colleges, schools and libraries, and I do talk about the origins of the dance which happen to be in the temples. So I have done my own research on it, not just because I'm a dancer but also because I have an interest in history. So it just so happened that I got the opportunity to make these presentations, and then because of my interest in history and my existing knowledge already, I combined that with dance and I presented that. So because of that I have some knowledge. So I'm not a historian, and this is all based on my research. And of course I have spoken to a couple of Odissi dancers and historians themselves, like scholars, and gathered some information. So this is based on that. So now let me tell you about what's shown in the movie, and then I'll tell you what I think of it, and like why I differ in what ways, and why I think it's not the accurate representation. So what it shows in the movie, I'll give you the part which is relevant in case you want to go watch the movie, and I don't want to give you spoilers, but like the background, the more I think the second half of the movie showed a guy falling in love with a girl, and I'm going to go into the details because I don't want to spoil it for you. So let's say a part of the story had a guy Shyam Singha Roy falling in love with a girl who happened to be a Devdasi, whom he happened to meet in a temple, and she was one of the dancers. So these Devdasis were people who used to stay inside the temple, were like people assigned with several duties, and one of the duties used to be performing for the god, because the gods need to be entertained, and dance is one of the ways of entertaining them. So they used to stay in the temple and then perform and dance for a god, and it's based in West Bengal. Like, so this part of the movie happens to be in a temple in West Bengal, which I'm not sure how accurate that is, because I mean, I'm sure it's accurate, like I'm sure it was happening in some temples, but at least for they don't show Odissi, but like in Odissi the temples were in Odisha. I'm guessing there could be overlap, I'm not sure, but anyway, that's not where the crux of this video. So they show that these girls are being sexually preyed upon by the head priest, and therefore the guy comes in and becomes a hero and saves the young girls who are being sexually exploited, and the women, and saves that particular girl he fell in love with. He saves her from this flesh trade, so to say, and gives her a new life, and then they have their life and so on. So like the movie doesn't revolve around this. Like I thought it would be around like have a social message like many South movies do, but it was actually a love story, which again most South movies are. I mean, if you think about it, I was like, wait a second, I thought it's about some social reform. And then recently, on a tangent, I was watching the movie recently, as in like 7 months ago, I was watching the movie Roja. So I thought it was like in my head, I was in the mood for a patriotic movie, and then I realized, oh no, it's not a patriotic movie, it's a love story. I was like, okay, yeah, it's a South movie, it's a love story and with some other elements. Okay, so Anyway, coming back to Shyam Singha Roy, which is the name of the movie, this is what they show. Now, I do enjoy the song in which, you know, she's dancing. Sai Pallavi, the actress who portrays the protagonist of the Devdasi, once a Devdasi, former Devdasi, and love interest of Shyam Singha Roy. I enjoy the song, the way she dances, the way it's portrayed, simple music, which I like, and I go back to it once in a while on YouTube, and I see a lot of comments, you know, over there saying, since I watched that song, I go through the comments often, and there are people who are saying things like, this is such a shame that this used to happen, it's really sad, unfortunate, women used to be subjected to all that. And that's what prompted me to make this video, because I would ideally not want Indians to have this bad image of their culture, because I have a different view of that culture thanks to my research and my background in dance. Is that okay, so that's a fact that the dances, the classical dances, were banned by the British, and I think that was a very dark period in our history, because you are being banned from performing your own culture. And the reason why they were banned, because these Devdasis were considered morally flawed, or they were morally promiscuous. They were considered promiscuous. They were considered, forget about all those words I use, just they were deemed prostitutes, and that's exactly the word I use when I make my presentations, when I'm talking about the religion. They were deemed prostitutes, and therefore they were banned. And I don't go into much details because that's not the main focus of my presentations. And then, you know, like, people might not be, you know, I have presented these presentations in USA, so they might not be aware of Indian history, but here I can, if you are an Indian or someone who's interested in Indian history or Indologist, then I can go into a little bit more details. And keep in mind, I'm not a historian, so this is my independent research. So according to the research I have done, and from what I have understood and gathered, keeping in mind my overall interest in history and Indian history, is that certain facts are presented certain way because of trying to prove Indian rituals, customs and practices is backward, and being shown that a certain period in our history, let's say the rule under which we would say during the British, helped us. So this being such an example that the Devdasis were prostitutes, or they were preyed upon, whichever version you want to believe in, or you hear or you get to see. Like in this movie, they were preyed upon. In some cases they were seen as prostitutes. Whichever version is a version which makes you feel that the British helped us, helped the women, and became the savior, which you get to hear that theory in many other cases also, such as, you know, them teaching us English, them building railroads, them giving us education and all those things. So it's part of this whole story where it's shown that we were rescued because of people who came into our country. Now, because of the kind of history that we are being exposed to, thanks to a different kind of narrative which we have exposure to because of social media and different people being in power, is that version may not be true, may not be accurate. And therefore, in this context, the fact is, and this is not necessarily, in fact, like I found this is not necessarily because of the new shifts. I found this YouTube video, actually it's actually a TED talk of this dancer, Bharatanatyam dancer, who speaks about this. In fact, hers was the first one I found on this topic, which just came up because I was doing my research on Odissi, because I have an interest in all these things. And she was talking about how these dancers were sexually empowered, they were liberated, like they did not marry. And so this is the version that I have and I believe in. So she said that, and it made sense to me, is that they did not marry, and therefore they were open to they could have relationships with anyone they chose, like sexual relations or whatever relations. They were not fitting into the typical man-wife unit or narrative or box that the mainstream society had created, and therefore they would stay outside of it by not being married and have relations with whoever they pleased, which for the British, who were very let's say Victorian, who had not seen these things before, who are very like in the sense like this is right, this is wrong. They had very strong like black and white way of looking at things, because they consider some things moral and immoral, and this did not fit into their moral code, and therefore they considered it as something wrong. Okay, so does that make sense? So what I'm trying to say is that they came to India and saw these sexually liberated women who chose to have sex with whoever they chose to, whoever they pleased or they wanted, outside of the sanctimony or the socially approved institution of marriage, which is what, let's say, they were most familiar with, and therefore they considered this as immoral. Okay, so that's one version. The other version, and I was speaking to actually a scholar, she is a PhD, I don't know in what exactly, but I met her in one of these Odissi dancers in North America meet. Hang on, let me just get some water. Yeah, so I met her in one of these meets and I brought this topic up because that was a question I had, and she has done extensive research, and she mentioned something on the lines of that yes, these things are dicey, and those things like there is a kind of overlap between the fact that yes, there might have been a power imbalance like it's shown in the movie. I mean, I didn't bring up the movie, but I had just watched the movie. I think probably that's why I brought this topic up, to get some clarity around it. And I don't remember, I didn't quite understand the answer, but I think she didn't confirm the movie narrative. So anyway, and again, like the other theory that I wanted to also throw up and propose as another way of looking at it is that these women, these Devdasis, were under the patronage of the king. Like, so they were artists, let's think of it that way, and they were under the patronage of the king, whoever sponsored the temple, sponsored their lifestyle, so on. And it is kind of understood not because there's a power imbalance, but kind of a way of, let's say, whoever is the master of the house, is the person that woman has relations with. So not because she is coerced into it, but because she understands that, okay, this king is providing me with the patronage, and therefore I'm expected to, if he wants to, or I would surrender, just like how a wife would surrender to her husband. So something on those lines. So these are the two possible theories which make sense to me. The one in which the women were liberated enough to choose their partners, and as many as they would choose to have, and the other one in which the woman and the Devdasi understood that the king is sponsoring their lifestyle, and therefore she will have to submit to him, not because she's forced to, but she understands that's the dynamic. So these are the two things that I would like to propose would have been the reality, would be a more accurate representation, instead of the one that has been showed in the movie, where people are coerced and forced into it, minor girls and all those things like it was shown in the movie, or the other narrative where these Devdasis were prostitutes and they had fallen upon bad times, so they would be prostitutes, and therefore the British banned the concept, the culture, the practice of dance in temples just to save these. Because in the larger, if I look at the larger narrative that has been shared with us and been taught to us in schools, is more and more increasingly under attack and being questioned. And I have every reason to believe, after having lived in India and countries outside and the way people perceive India, and now things are shifting, that there was an intention behind painting India this way, where we are the backward or the underdeveloped nation with outdated, superstitious, illogical practices, and we had to be civilized. So yeah, so that was my input. I don't know if this, like, I was coherent because I was kind of thinking through things, like, but and then again, I'm not a historian, so there's no way I can go and check. I wish I could, but I do believe, I'm like 100% confident that this is not accurate, and therefore I would like you to do your research and dig a little deeper, and instead of accepting what is always shown in common narrative, because the narrative often is not always true. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.